These are the sounds of the Roland TR-808, the most famous and influential drum machine ever created. Today we're looking at its history, and we'll do so by showing you 16 of our favorite 808 patterns, spanning across 4 decades and beginning with its birth in 1980. We'll be using the OXI One as a sequencer, so you can see all the different instruments and you can try the patterns on your drum machine or in your DAW. Hello everyone, this is... When Roland introduced the TR-808 in 1980, it was only intended as a tool for making demos. But some more experimental musicians actually liked the synthetic sounds of the 808 and didn't replace them with real drums. And so that same year, the 808 could be heard for the very first time during a live broadcast performance by Yellow Magic Orchestra, the Japanese pioneers of electronic music. The song was called Thousand Knives, and it's also included on their album BGM, which was released the year after. The 808 had to share the spotlight though. YMO's drummer Yukihiro Takahashi accompanied the drum machine on an acoustic drum kit, doubling the kick and snare and adding a few classic tom fills. In 1982, as early hip-hop emerged from the underground into the mainstream, Afrika, Bambaataa and the Soulsonic Force released Planet Rock. Bambaataa was heavily into electronic bands like Yellow Magic Orchestra and Kraftwerk and wanted to combine their electronic sounds with funk. So he and producer Arthur Baker adapted the beat of Kraftwerk's numbers to the 808, which became the blueprint for this newborn electro-funk genre and began establishing the 808's reputation as the hip-hop drum machine. A true novelty of the 808 was that you could easily program your own patterns. Its predecessor, the CR-78, was mainly a preset rhythm machine, and while it was also programmable, it had no interface to do so on the machine itself. You had to use an external foot switch or a special write switch. Compared to that, the 808's 16-step sequencer is pure luxury. It allows you to quickly punch in and edit patterns, and also provides instant visual feedback. Having a machine like the TR-808 gave independence to musicians. Among them was Marvin Gaye. When he broke ties with Motown, the 808 was a way for him to keep creating music without producers or the backing of a big record company. And he made excellent use of the 808. For this song, he programmed one of the most iconic and instantly recognizable drum patterns ever. Before I play the entire drum pattern, let me just quickly solo the hi-hats so you can appreciate the detail that's in there. In 1983, after only 3 years, Roland stopped the production of the 808. It was considered a commercial failure, and it had to compete with more realistic-sounding sample-based drum machines like the Lindrum. This meant that a large number of 808s were now available on the second-hand market for very little money, and it became an affordable tool even for beginning producers. But that's of course no longer the case. The 12,000 units that were produced now have become collector's items, and realistically, I'll never be able to afford one. So I've been saving up and bought this thing. That's an 808, a replica of the 808, but without the sequencer. It's manufactured by one guy in France, and it actually shares the same analog circuitry with the 808, so I think we're as close as we can get to the original sound. It wasn't long before producers got more experimental with the 808's sound controls. When producer Rick Rubin created the beat of It's Yours for Tilo Rock and Jazzy J, he turned up the bass drum decay, which shifted the role of the kick from a percussive instrument to a bass instrument. It's also interesting that there are actually two different hi-hat patterns playing at the same time. You can hear these hi-hats on the right channel and these hats on the left channel. Together, they create a very nice swirling stereo effect. Another hip-hop record produced by Rick Rubin was the Beastie Boys classic License to Ill. Adam Yauch was inspired by the reverse guitar recordings of Jimi Hendrix, and so for Paul Revere, he applied the same technique to the 808. He recorded this pattern and played it back in reverse. Fun fact, that sample at the end was taken from the previous song, Tila Rock's It's Yours. Although the 808 had the reputation of being a hip-hop drum machine by now, that didn't stop musicians from using it in other music styles. The Canadian electro-industrial band Skinny Puppy used it to great effect on their song Dig It. In the original, the snare wasn't from the 808 though. They opted for one that sounds more like a trash can. And who knew that when you distort an 808 clap, it sounds like a screaming demon?
Frank, I think your mom's calling you.
Rick Rubin was a big fan of the 808, and so it's not surprising that he also used it when he produced LL Cool J's album Walking with a Panther. You can really tell that the budget was tight though. They only got a Corgi Panther mixed breed, and they had to Photoshop LL Cool J into the picture. This pattern has a lot to offer. There's a long decay on the bass drum, manual writing of multiple controls, and an additional shaker pattern. Sadly, we can't use the maracas, because we already used the hand clap. The 808's biggest moment in 80s mainstream pop came with Whitney Houston's #1 hit, I Wanna Dance with Somebody. Although it features the Lindrum kick, it makes up for it with a glorious overuse of the 808 cowbell. Three UK musicians even liked the TR-808 so much that they named their band after it, 808 State. But then those traitors used the 909 for their biggest hit, so understandably, one of them left the band to pursue a solo career and make music with an 808 again. And that band member in question is a guy called Gerald, aka Gerald Simpson, with his acid house anthem Voodoo Ray. After abandoning the 808, Roland started to move away from analog instruments. The TR-909 already was a hybrid. 4 of its 11 voices were digital. It used samples for the hats and cymbals. And soon Roland's drum machines would be all digital. But the spirit of the 808 lived on in these later machines. The Roland R8, for example, had an expansion card which contained 808 samples. And that's what Aphex Twin allegedly used to make the beat for Crystal. The drum programming heard in that song goes well beyond the capabilities of the 808. For example, it had no pitch or tuning knob for the kick. But since this became a very popular modification, it is now already included in most 808-inspired drum machines. If I flip this switch on the 808, I can change the bass drum tuning. In the 90s, a producer duo from Detroit created their own nautical-themed myth called Drexciya, spanning across multiple concept albums. There's even a Drexciya graphic novel. Like most of their work, Andreaen Sand Dunes harkens back to early electro and Detroit techno, but it's underwater. And fortunately for us, they love to use the 808 to accompany their subaquatic soundscapes. Next up is Lose Control by Missy Elliott, an old-school 808 beat in a modern rap production. In case the rhythm and that distinctive ascending synth line seem familiar to you, yes, these were indeed taken from a 1983 song by Cybotron called Clear. And Cybotron in turn recreated that synth line from a Kraftwerk song. It's the intro to Hall of Mirrors. Fascinating how so many roads lead back to Kraftwerk. Who says that the 808 isn't capable of some grittier techno? Not Daft Punk, that's for sure. And who needs more than 16 steps for an entire song? Also not Daft Punk. Technologic is the hypnotic, repetitive 808 pattern we all deserve. This pattern is actually pretty special to us, since it marks the 100th drum pattern transcription we released until now. Be sure to check out our Patreon. On there you can find the transcriptions of all drum patterns from this video, cheat sheets, and lots more. It's always great to see a new generation of musicians discovering this part of music history and paying tribute to the musical heritage that is the 808. The use of the 808 in Kimbra's Cameo Lover could be seen as pure nostalgia or pop culture reference for its own sake, but in my opinion, it is a testament to how well the 808 still integrates into productions of all kinds, in this case creating a wonderful contrast to the string arrangements surrounding it. The influence of the 808 on trap music is undeniable. It shaped the sound of the genre. And the rhythmic elements of trap in turn found their way into other music styles. Nowadays, the term 808 has become synonymous with tuned sub-basses with long decay, but occasionally you can spot a real 808 in the wild, although they're often heavily processed. One of my favorite rhythms from recent years is Sweatpants by Childish Gambino, aka Donald Glover, which makes great use of the 808's claves and congas. M.I.A.'s Borders is another modern production that clearly carries the sonic DNA of the TR-808. For this one, I adapted the beat back to the 808 and made a retro version out of it. I layered the snare with the rimshot to imitate those modern trap snares. Remember that this was just our small personal selection of patterns that we found especially interesting. Let us know your favorite 808 songs in the comments. And as always, a big shout out to all of our patrons. Thanks to your support, we can keep making these videos.